You were talking about the response of INEC as a body to polls experience that we had yesterday.
Yes. So Anna was making a point that when a body indulges in self-adulation, the likelihood is that that body will not be able to do serious introspection and then self-correct some of its processes that are faulty, particularly when we're talking about something as important as election. And I dare say that there's so much self-adulation going on in our government, in our institutions. There's a discernible mentality that is exhibited by those who man our institutions. They come out to justify what they are doing and then to showcase what they are doing, even when it is not the best, believing that the people will accept it, whether they like it or not. And when we do not have alternatives to these institutions, it can even get worse. I mean, we talked about a society where the attainment of 7,500 megawatts power production is celebrated as something that is phenomenal. And when you take them on, they then say, no, considering where we're coming from, you know, this is a milestone and this is an achievement. So that's the kind of environment in which we find ourselves. And so that's the kind of environment in which INEC functions and operates. However, I need to make the point that INEC's problem, in large part, stems from what I had articulated earlier when I was talking about the theoretical sketch that I was drawing up. And I think that we need to return to that for the purpose of, you know, doing justice to this question. There is something that drives electoral failure in Nigeria. There is a mindset amongst the political class to use electoral dysfunctionality as a foundation of their sustenance in government. Largely, politicians pay lip service to improving on our electoral processes. But if you really, really want to know how politicians think, you need to know what they do in the course of election. If our electoral process were to be working perfectly, many of our politicians will not be in power. They know. They know this. And so they thrive in that atmosphere of electoral chaos. They know that if this system functions perfectly as it should function, they will no longer be part of our political leadership in this country. And so when there is mayhem and disorder and anarchy in the system, they come out on top and then say, yes, we've won an election. You go to court. The court is not a wizard. So the court, the judges didn't go there. And in any case, the Electoral Act talks about substantial compliance. So once there's substantial compliance, once a kind of disenfranchisement that is localized in a particular area will not affect the overall result that is permissible under the law. That can be tolerated under the law. And then that becomes a problem that is tolerated for another 4 years. And then something like that reoccur again. So we need to point attention to that. And so if we want our electoral system to work for the Nigerian people, we will have to devise ways and means to make it work in such a way that it doesn't throw up on a continued basis a kind of leadership that want to sustain electoral malfunctioning, as I've said. If you look at all that was said since this election began about all the problems, I can tie all this to what our politicians desire. When you talk about election materials not coming early, arriving late, it can be designed in such a way that there will be no voting in certain areas. And then voting will close at a particular point anyway. And so by that, you've excluded certain people from the electoral process. You can also have a situation whereby voting will take place in a place and then ballot boxes are snatched. There will be violence if they are the strongholds of your opponent. So you don't want votes in those areas to be counted. So you disrupt the process. And as I've told you, the Electoral Act allows, if there's a non-election in the particular place, if it will not affect the overall result of the election, it can pass.
We are told, I'm sorry to butt in, but we are told that Yemi Adamolekun is in our studio in Abuja. Yemi Adamolekun is the Executive Director, Enough is Enough Nigeria. And she's also been doing some monitoring of the elections that we had in Nigeria yesterday. Yemi, it's really nice to have you in the studio with us to be part of this conversation.
Thank you.
I believe you must have had some time to take some rest, but before you went to bed yesterday, what were your prevailing thoughts based on what you saw and what you heard about the election?
Thank you. I think given the week extension, there were sort of expectations and also reassurances from INEC that they had everything under control. The recs confirmed that they received all their materials. So in the light of the issues that came up yesterday, I think it then sort of shifted focus again, that we quite in a lot of ways spent yesterday talking about the challenges, logistical challenges, the violence in some places, and we're unable to look at the positives because in some areas people voted very peacefully, were done, started counting on time. So I think just the reiteration of the challenges that we're having, or INEC's logistical challenges, what was quite unfortunate that we focused on. And I think also not forgetting the fact that in some areas, yes, there were challenges, but then we shouldn't let the politicians off the hook as well. Because by the time you have people coming in to burn ballot papers, that's not an INEC issue. Also putting the box squarely at the foot of the politicians, and for whatever reason, quite a number of that has been discussed, voter suppression or just people not wanting the process to go as smoothly. Thugs, they came into different polling units and scattered results and intimidated voters. So I think overall, yes, there's been. Nigerians still came out despite the challenges. People waited patiently. I'm in Abuja, and quite a number of polling units, the process started late. There were challenges with either card readers or whatever. But people waited patiently because they were determined to vote. And I think for me that was also quite good to see that Nigerians still believe in the process, still believe that this is how we choose our leaders, and we're willing to participate fully in that process.
All right, Yemi, I want to find out exactly, I want to throw this question to you. How do you feel, or how do you expect INEC to respond to some of these issues of violence where they took place in some of the parts of the country where elections were held? Do you think INEC can take up this issue?
Well, at least in Rivers, the two local governments that will be re-voting, quote unquote, if I put it that way, today, won. But I think they have not, as far as I know, come out to give a full assessment of all the other areas that had issues, what their position would be. Are elections just cancelled and cancelled, or are they going to allow citizens in those areas to re-vote again today? Now, given also timing, it's now 5:30, 5:40 odd o'clock in the morning. If people don't know now if they're going to have to, if they will be able to come back and vote, I'm not quite sure then what that means, if that would be possible. Because there were quite a number of citizens who were quite upset that their votes will not count, either because they were burnt or the polling unit was scattered due to violence, and that might then be their fate.